Hello and welcome to Dice and Demons. I'm Emma, and in this video I'm going to show you how I paint a snow-themed Kroot Carnivore for Warhammer 40,000. So I really like a lot of the Kroot warriors I've seen where they are painted green, and I definitely want to do a green one for myself as well. But I also thought it would be fun to see what it would look like in a much more sort of cold color scheme, and so that's why I had the idea of a snow-themed one. I wanted to paint this relatively quickly using some fairly easy techniques because I'm considering making an entire army out of these guys, and so I don't want anything that's way too complicated and that'll take like 10 hours for each single Kroot model. That's simply just not doable if I'm going to have a 2,000 points army at some point. So I thought I would use the sort of Slapchop method, and I know a lot of people don't like the word. It's basically the same as zenithal highlight, where you have a darker color underneath, and then you either dry brush it as I do here, or you use a spray can to achieve sort of a lighter color where the light would most hit the surfaces, like from above, for instance. And the reason I'm using the color I'm using here, which was burnt moss, one of the speed paints from the armor painter, which was mixed with about 50% medium, instead of, for instance, a black or gray spray, is just because I wanted it not to be too stark and not to be too dark, because, well, since it's snow themed, I want it to be relatively light. And I just like the burnt moss. It's sort of a greenish gray tone, which I thought would work a little bit better than something that was completely desaturated, like a black or a gray. So that's why I'm using it here. I really like experimenting with the sort of Slapchop thing, where you can take all sorts of different colors as undercoats and then dry brush on top and then put something completely different on top. It can give you all sorts of really nice results, like if you're undercoating with a pink, for instance, dry brush a bit of white and then use a yellow color on top. It really gives a nice warm saturated yellow. So there's all sorts of ways of experimenting with this, which I think is a little bit more difficult if you don't have an airbrush, at least, to do with the zenithal, where you tend to just use a spray can, for instance. This I think is very approachable and something that most people can do with what they already have in their painting arsenal. Then I am using a Battleship Grey, which is also from the armor painter, one of the speed paints, for the grey parts of the skin. And then for the feet, I'm using another color from the armor painter, and this one is called Caribbean Ocean, and it's sort of a nice vibrant turquoise color. And I am just quickly doing a wet blend between the Caribbean Ocean and the Battleship Grey. And the reason for this is just, I thought it would be a little bit boring if the model was just monotone gray all the way through, and so I thought, well, why not give him some blue feet? Because who doesn't like blue feet? I don't know. I just thought it would look nice, and I decided also to do the same thing on his hands. Then for the face, I decided I wanted something that would pop a little bit more, and so I am using Familiar Pink, which is again a speed paint from the armor painter. And I'm not quite sure if I imagine that it's some sort of face paint or if it's the way his face is looking or whatever. I just thought you need a nice sort of vibrant color to grab your attention for the face, and so I went with pink because, well, pink is always cool, right? And then for the hair, I decided I wanted just a touch of some warm color, and so I went with red, and this one is a contrast paint. This is called Blood Angels Red, and it's from Citadel. If you want to do something like this for an entire army and you want to do something that is really quick, I think you could just stop here, basically. There is no reason not to. It's completely fine, and it's very readable what's what, and you can see where you have the more highlighted areas, where you have the lighter colors, and you can also tell where you have the shadows, so you could definitely just stop here. I just wanted to enhance the look of the skin a little bit, so I bordered down a bit of white paint. It's matte white from the armor painter, and I used that quite quickly just to touch up some of the highlights on the skin. Then for the belly, I used the Skeleton Horde contrast paint for the base coat, and then I'm just using a little bit of Wraithbone to again pick up some of the highlights. I would say that the same goes for this. You could just leave it as it is. It is very readable. It's easy to understand what's what, and if you're in a hurry, that would look completely fine. Then for the face, I wanted to really accentuate the shadows, so I'm using a dark turquoise color, and this one is called Achillean Green. It's also from Citadel, and I just used that really quickly to paint in some of the shadows, and particularly sort of the beak and the eyes, and to make sure that it's sort of easy to see what's going on, and because I just really like very nice sharp contrasts, particularly in important areas such as the face. I then also used the Achillean Green just to paint in the line between sort of the belly and the more fleshy parts of his body. You could also leave out that step. I quite like making sort of black lines on my models, and every time I get a chance to, I probably will. And it doesn't take long because this is actually a relatively uncomplicated model, so you can do a lot of work relatively quickly, and it will just really enhance the look of the finished model, I find. Then for highlighting the face, I am using a couple of fluorescent colors from Huge Miniatures, and this one is called Pulse Wave Pink. And I'm using it again in the same way as I used the Achillean Green for the shadows, just some nice, quick, relatively sharp lines, just to bring out some of the highlights on his face. Again, this is not strictly necessary. I just think it looks cool, and I like using fluorescent colors, and I like bright. I like bright pink. So that's why I went down that route. On his feet and hands, I used first a color called Aquamarine from Vallejo, a nice turquoise color, just to bring up a little bit of the highlights again. I don't think the first step that you see me painting here made that much of a difference. It helped a little bit, but again, if you're short on time or you just want to get an army on the tabletop with relatively little effort, you could definitely skip this step too. And then lastly, I used a mixture of a neon yellow called Starfire Yellow, also from Huge Miniatures, mixed in with a whole lot of white as the last layer of highlights. And the reason for adding just a touch of the yellow is because it's a trick I saw on a video from Vince Venturella, who's like a painting guru. So if you are not following him, you definitely should be. Where he talks about highlighting blue with just sort of a touch of yellow in the final layer of highlights, because it makes it look much more alive, and that is definitely a tip I have embraced, and I think he's completely right. It looks really nice. Then for the hair, I went over it first with a red color, and this one is, you could use any sort of more or less standard red color, but here I'm using a color from Chimera Colors, which they have just named the Red. I love the name of that color, because it is, when you're thinking about the color red, that just perfectly encapsulates it. So it couldn't have a better name. Then for the second layer of highlights, I am using Orange Fire from Vallejo. And if you have been following this channel for any length of time, you know that I usually would go for like a fluorescent orange, but I really want the hair to be very warm, and the fluorescent colors just are a little bit cooler, and so that's why I skipped them here and just went for completely ordinary colors. And that also goes for the yellow you see me using here. This is Flash Kids Yellow from Citadel. When you're choosing your color schemes, I think it's always a nice idea to try to see if you can get quite a few contrasts in, like both with the colors themselves and the saturation perhaps, and also whether they are warm and cold and how dark they are, and also with the texture. And so that's why I thought it would be quite nice to have this red orangey hair on an otherwise very cold looking model. Then for the shoulder pad, I'm using another speed paint from the Army Painter, and this one is called Noble Skin. I haven't really used it much before, but I was very pleasantly surprised by it. Even though this is a flat surface, it just, it dried really flat. It looks completely fine, just one coat of the Noble Skin, and it looks very decent. And I just ended up using a little bit of white mixed with the noble skin for a quick edge highlight. So that was really easy. Then for the base, I decided I wanted a little bit of frost effect to just really sell the idea of the snow theme. And so that's why I'm using a bit of liquid frost from Green Stuff World. It's a sort of saline solution that, well, it looks just like, I don't know, skimmed milk or something. But when it dries, it'll form these tiny salt crystals that looks like frost. And I find that if you just give it one go, perhaps it won't look that great. But then if you wait until it's completely dry and then add another layer, or perhaps 2 or 3 other layers, in fact, they end up forming these really nice crystals. They're very fragile though, but on the other hand, they're quite easy to repair. So I don't mind using them even on models that I am using for gaming purposes. So here you can see my Snow Kroot Warrior. He was really quick to paint and quite fun. It was a much different color scheme to what I usually do. I think I'm quite happy with it, but I'm not sure that this is what I'll be going for with an entire army. I think it's just, yeah, to be honest, I just I miss a lot more of the brighter colors. It's it's a personal preference thing. I think he looks completely fine. It's just yeah, it was more like something that was fun to try out than something I think I would enjoy replicating over and over on an entire army. But I'm really curious to know, of course, what you think. And as you can tell, he does glow a little bit under a UV light, particularly the tuft of the face, and then a slight touch on the feet and the hands as well. So let me know what you think if you like this color scheme. Also, before you leave, I would of course, as always, like to take the opportunity to thank the wonderful people who support Dice and Demons over on Patreon. So thank you so much to Thomas Madsen, Gwenna L, Jordan Hollands, Queen's Wolf, Double J's Terrain, Mola, Steve Eberly, Nazim Makaya, Andre Correa, Anthony Polcastro, Bosworth the Rogue, Mando Project, Starcon85, S. Bear, Echinococus, Elliot Philby, Cyberfossil, Cinnamon Coffee 87, Terrainery, Joshua and Anya Pavelczyk, and Charlie Robertson. If you would like to also support Dice and Demons, you can do so over on Patreon, and I'll leave a link to that in these show notes. Also remember, you can follow me as Dice and Demons over on X, formerly known as Twitter, and on Instagram as well. So I hope you like this video, guys, and let me know if you have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, any sort of thing. Let me know in the comments, and I will do my very best to get back to you. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!